And Arnie Sherman.
You're listening to What Do You Know on Newstalk KGVO, AM 1290 and 98.3 FM. Arnie Sherman, good Sunday morning to you.
Good morning to you, Scott. How are you?
Good, thank you.
So we're going to have an interesting show today. We're going to talk with Brigitta Freer, or in some cases, Brigitta Miranda-Freer, depending on the day of the week, how she uses her name. She's the executive director of the Montana World Trade Center. And you know, there are World Trade Centers all over the world that are part of a network that was started by the World Trade Center in New York City. And Montana has one. The license is held by the University of Montana. And as you know, I ran it for a number of years. And Brigitta worked for me for a while at the World Trade Center, and then she went off to do some other work, and then she came back and was hired as the executive director to replace me, and she's been doing amazing things there. She also has taken on a broader portfolio of activity representing Montech, which, as many of our listeners know, is the business incubator in town. She's also involved with the Innovation Gateway Corridor that Missoula is becoming, sort of a technology leader in, and doing a lot of work with women entrepreneurs and women leaders. So, and they just got a big grant at the university from Google, $850,000 from Google to help indigenous women entrepreneurs. So there are lots of things going on in the World Trade Center, and its portfolio of activities has expanded. And I thought it would be a good time now to chat with her about what they've been involved in and what they've been doing.
Absolutely. She's got an incredible background. It's very diverse. And look, coming out of almost 2 years of COVID, I'd love to understand also about how her world has changed and how what she does has changed in that time, because that's really, hate to say it, but it's a common thread that we ask a lot of our guests these days is how did they fare over the last few years? Yep. Right. But anyway, let us take a break. And when we come back, we'll join our guest, Brigitta Freer, back after this. We are back with our guest, Brigitta Miranda-Freer, the executive director of the Montana World Trade Center.
Brigitta, it's good to see you this morning. How are you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
You know, I think we're all getting ready here for winter in Missoula, Montana. So,
ready or not, it's here.
Yeah, it's here, whether you like it or not. You know, it's funny that every once in a while on social media, you get these flashbacks. They'll send you pictures from years ago. And pretty much at this time of the year, all my old pictures are like of snow on the ground and, you know, weather that we shouldn't be having in November, what we are having. So, but I think we're all good. So tell our listeners who aren't familiar with having a World Trade Center, you know, in Missoula, Montana, what the organization is all about.
Right. What is it you'd say you do here, right?
Yeah, right.
Right. So Montana World Trade Center is a World Trade Center. There are about 300 of them in 100 countries around the globe. This one happens to be housed at the University of Montana. You know that, Arnie, because you used to actually work there.
Correct.
Back in the day.
And then I was paroled.
Yeah.
And, you know, now I'm on the work release. So.
Yep. Well, so our mission is to grow Montana's international trade and investment portfolio. And we do that pretty much through three main buckets of work. That's direct kind of on-demand technical assistance to businesses, trainings and forums that we put together, and statewide initiatives that we think will move the needle on Montana's international trade and investment portfolio. So that could be like our work on the foreign direct investment front, or the fact that we do an annual trade survey, trade missions, things like that.
So as if that wasn't enough to occupy your time, the university has also given you another bucket of responsibilities.
It's true.
So tell us what that's inclusive of.
Sure. Well, we all wear many hats in Montana, so I don't complain about that for sure. And in fact, it's exciting work. WTC and I specifically play a role in overseeing operations at Montech, which is the Montana Technology Enterprise Center. So it's a technology incubator that's across the river from the University of Montana. And what we're doing right now is planning for an innovation corridor gateway project there. So really kind of leveraging the critical mass that we have with a completely full Montech, and it has been for a couple of years. We've got some bioscience firms there that are really bursting at the seams. So trying to get some space out in front of them and solving for that pain point. And then, again, leveraging that to create something even bigger on site, right? Something that will house best in class businesses from startups to established firms. That's the goal.
Well, Montech also, it was in the news, just got a grant from Google.
Yeah.
And that's pretty exciting. So tell us about that.
Well, I can tell you very little about that one because it wasn't my doing specifically. So Montech and the Google grant came about because of the work of Morgan Slenberger, who's part of the Accelerate Montana team, the University of Montana. And she worked hard for a number of months on this top secret award. And I think this is going to be something you have to edit, Arnie, because I don't have all the details on it. Sorry. Yeah, I believe that it's trying to facilitate tribal, entrepreneurship as a career in some of our tribal and more rural parts of our state. So. Yeah,
I think there's going to be a partnership between Montech and several of the tribes and probably Salish Kootenai College, because it's an $850,000 grant, which is substantial. And I think there were only a handful of them awarded around the United States. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. So Montech, so the University of Montana has a number of different sort of outward facing business serving units, right? Everything Montana World Trade Center does fit into that bucket. The Small Business Development Center is in that bucket. Procurement and Technical Assistance Center, Launchpad, AMRI. So there are just a number of different organizations that are sort of geared towards economic development work of some kind. And those
organizations, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but did all those organizations have a forum to facilitate working together? And do you have a weekly or monthly kind of get together with all the different EDs?
Yeah, we do actually. And it's been via Zoom for the last several months, but we get together every week. And the faces on the screen, there are more and more of them, but it's the suite of programs is called Accelerate Montana. So there are a number of different programs. Again, these are these outward-facing, business-serving programs that are working with businesses and entrepreneurs across the state in some cases.
So who has it for our audience? Name some of the folks that have a seat at that table. Is it Paul with Blackstone, the Launchpad?
Mm-hmm. Paul Gladen. Yep. Mike Braun is maybe a slightly newer arrival to that team formally, and he's working on workforce training initiatives. Jen Stevens and her colleagues from the Small Business Development Center. Patty Cox is with the Procurement and Technical Assistance Center. Seriously, there are about 16 faces on the screen there, so I won't go through all the names.
Sure.
But they are organizations that people would recognize around this community. And in many cases, I don't think folks realize actually that the University of Montana supports these operations and that public service, right?
Right.
So when we talk about economic development impact of the university, I know people often think about it, sometimes think about it in terms of how much money is pulled in for a football game. And that's great. I love football too. But I think if we look at the overall impact that the university and programs like this have, it's just far reaching across the state and, hundreds of millions of dollars. So.
And for a long time, the Bureau of Business and Economic Research has been domiciled at the university, and that provides, I think, a unique, baseline for all of these organizations to get data to help drive some of the directions that we need to be going. I mean, it's a good combination of all of those things being supported by the BBER.
Yep. True story. And actually, we work with the BBER on our annual International Trade and Investment Survey. So that's where we're reaching out as an organization. The Trade Center is reaching out to our exporting firms around the state, importing firms, and firms that have foreign direct investment, just to understand, what's working for them, what's not, hot markets, how are tariffs impacting them, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, the BBER helps us to put together that survey and execute it.
You alluded to all the faces on the screen, and we've all, over the last 2 years, become accustomed to Zooming around. And the Trade Center historically had done trade missions in person, getting on planes and taking companies abroad and hosting them. And that has morphed during this last period to virtual trade missions. And I know you've just completed one this week with Israel, and you've done others in the past. How has that been going?
Well, I would say better than nothing.
Yeah, right.
I was thinking about it so what we just completed this week, in fact, it was yesterday, was it's the second Montana-Israel Virtual Trade Forum, and this one had a focus on digital health, right? So, the silver lining of trying to make connections this way with people all around the world is that every single person, every single business, we've all been in this bucket, right? So, we're all the same size on Zoom. So it's not like we've been at a tremendous, competitive disadvantage if we're trying to establish new relationships or fan the flames on existing relationships. So that's good. And I think that the forums that we're hosting, such as the one I just referenced there, or the ones we've done in conjunction with, we did one with the Irish ambassador with bioscience focus back in the spring. They're good, but they're not perfect. And I sorely miss the opportunity to actually travel in person. I was thinking about it just yesterday that it almost these activities are so time consuming to plan, and when you finally, it's the day's there and it happens and you execute it, it's a little like having a baby, not a lot, just a little bit. But these virtual forums, and then it's all gone into the ether. So it's like you had to say goodbye to your baby right away. You don't get the same energy back as you do from in person, as you know.
Yes. Well, I've always said and still stand by it that, global business is based on relationships.
It is. And
you just can't build relationships on Zoom. I mean, that's the real basic reality of it all. And
maybe that makes us, maybe we're old, Arnie. I don't know, because I can think about all the relationships that the younger generation is comfortable building. I mean, at least social relationships virtually. So I don't know.
When you're writing checks and making purchases, you want to feel in touch and and all those sorts of things.
Yeah.
And I think that's important to the overall health. And I think one example of that is that haven't we just reopened after 9 years the office in Taiwan?
Yes. And I'm very glad to have that happen. And the woman that's staffing it, her name is Mei Mei Wong, and she previously worked for the state. I think in the interim, she worked for the U.S. Commercial Service. So she's very dedicated. She knows Montana very well, and it's really helpful to have boots on the ground. Someone making the case for Montana and Montana goods and services in country is really helpful. Yeah. Hey, Arnie, sorry, I was thinking about it. Someone asked me this question the other day and how important it is to have trade offices like that overseas. And absolutely, very important. And just to put it in perspective, I know this is a big deal for Montana. We have 2 international offices, right? We've got one in Taiwan and one in Japan. Las Vegas, just the city of Vegas has 11. They have their 11 of their own offices overseas. So
you're just validating the need to have relationships.
Yes.
And we reopened the office in Taiwan. Scott, you may not know this, but Montana does about $50 million a year in trade with Taiwan. So a lot of it is wheat and barley, and we import things from Taiwan like surgical masks. But we had the opportunity to restaff it. We went back to someone who had staffed it before because we had a relationship with Mei Wang.
Right, the continuity.
Continuity, and we know her, and we know her work, and and so I think that's just a revalidation as things start opening up again, that building the relationships and maintaining the relationships and rekindling relationships we've had in the past is a huge part of getting up to speed again.
A quick question, because I don't quite understand how it all works. Is there someone at the state level in Helena who is kind of the connecting point from a governmental standpoint that you work with and that Mei would work with, that's kind of a partner to you?
Sure. So Mei Wang is part of the Montana Department of Commerce staff and team, right? And Angela DeYoung actually runs the Office of International Trade at Montana Department of Commerce. So she and Mei are most frequently engaged. And the Montana World Trade Center is not a part of Montana Department of Commerce. However, we work very closely with Montana Department of Commerce, not only in, training initiatives. We do a lot of trainings in conjunction with DOC or just kind of for them and for our exporters around the state. And our interaction with Mei, and in fact, we've already had a conversation with Mei and our representative in Japan. We have direct interaction when it comes to foreign direct investment because the Trade Center actually spearheads the foreign direct investment initiative for our state. So what Montana's business case is on an industry specific basis, sharing that messaging and working with to develop prospects that are likely to actually consider siting in Montana or investing in a going concern here in Montana. Yes, lots of partnership there, and I hope that maybe explains how it all interrelates.
Are there other World Trade Centers on a regional standpoint that you have you interact with, like in Wyoming and Idaho and in Bozeman?
Yeah. So there's a World Trade Center in Denver that we interact with quite a bit. Probably in Utah, there's one. There's not one in Wyoming. I don't actually believe there's one in Idaho either. World Trade Center Denver is similar to ours in that they're a very service-oriented World Trade Center. So the types of things that I talked about are buckets of work, our work with technical assistance for businesses and trainings, and they do these things as well. And then the Utah one to some extent. So, it's good to have a network. Right. I just referred a client that reached out to us in Montana that had some very specific needs in relation to transitioning an e-commerce platform. And I knew I had a colleague at World Trade Center Denver who had the perfect background for this. So it's good to have that network to call on.
Scott, many of the World Trade Centers are real estate-based World Trade Centers.
Yeah.
And in the era prior to, the swarming nature of the internet, in many countries in the world, the international business all congregated in single buildings. And then the buildings would provide central services to a lot of the tenants. So they would have, telex, a word that probably hasn't been mentioned online in, 30 years.
Right.
They would have a teletype or telex service in the building. They might have translators in the building. Right. They may have conference centers. And so a lot of the World Trade Centers were built around being the focal point in their city for international trade and commerce. The original founders of the Montana World Trade Center thought about the same thing, having a building to do all of that, and they thought that should be in Great Falls, and that just never happened. And so, the one here became a service-oriented World Trade Center because that's what the marketplace needed more of. Speaking about service, Brigitta, what is the international reach of Montana businesses these days?
Well, specific to service exports, Arnie, or all
service or products? The whole range of things. I mean, most of our listeners don't think of Montana businesses as being global.
Oh yeah,
but we have a whole host of them from TSI, and Larry Kolb's operation to a whole host of others.
Yeah. Well, and you started to talk a little bit about our trade stats there at the beginning, but, let's do a little bit of education on that side. I mean, every year Montana exports, they were down last year in 2020, but even last year, $1.5 billion worth of hard goods. And then on the import side, we import far more than we export as a state. It's somewhere in the range of $4 billion last year. But where we send our hard good products to, usually, and sometimes the positions shift. The top position is always Canada. We always ship the most product to Canada. But then Canada, Korea, China, Mexico were our top partner countries for exports in 2020. And on the import side, there's a lot of crossover, actually. So Canada, China, Mexico, and Taiwan were top imports for 2020, import country partners for 2020. So, but we do ship products globally, right? I mean, you just referenced Technical Sourcing International. They've got research and development and sales arm here in Missoula, Montana. This is a firm that's, a very large player in the functional food industry globally. They have operations not only here in our state, but they've got operations in mainland China, where they do a lot of their ingredient manufacturing. They sell their products all over the world. One thing that's interesting to talk about, because I threw some trade stats at you there, it's just really important to keep in mind as you look at those and think you've got the full picture of Montana, that you probably don't, because statistics can lie sometimes, right? Or not tell you the whole story. One thing that gets lost when we look at trade statistics that are easily pulled up, like through the U.S. Census Bureau, they're not tracking our service exports from the state, right? So when I talk about service exports, I mean, it can be, think about all of our software as a service firms that exist in the state, those SaaS firms.
Right.
They're exporting product all over the world. And a lot of firms like that are capable of being exporters pretty early in their growth process, right? So I do think that, beware that these stats aren't in the stats that you see. Those hard good exports are tracked by bills of lading. So there's that. And then, even on the service exports, I was having a conversation last week with like a wildland firefighting company in Montana, and they have a service export fighting fire, right? And they've expanded operations outside the United States over the last few years, serving markets in South America and even looking at Australia, and that's great for our Montana-based firms because they have less, cyclical business. Well, they can round out the business that happens here in the United States during the summer months, or at least historically, and work all year round.
Or for example, someone like Sherry Davidoff or LMG, who's doing all kinds of work, and we've had her on before on data breaches and
cybersecurity,
ransomware threats. She has clients all over the world that she's providing services to.
She's got clients all over the world. She's capable of offering that service and exporting it. And certainly the threats are coming from all over the world, so it's good to. She's got the capability to serve everywhere.
Let's do a quick ID. Our guest is Brigitta Miranda-Freer. She is the executive director of the Montana World Trade Center, located right here on the University of Montana campus in Missoula. Brigitta, are you finding the work you're doing with, like, let's say the folks at the MEP who are trying to attract and bring businesses to this area, to the state, and also to this area, is there an increase, let's say, in terms of inquiry and activity now that we're kind of on the back end, hopefully, of COVID, or are we still kind of in a lag period?
So on the business attraction front, our organization focuses principally on foreign direct investment. So business attraction, but from foreign entities looking at Montana. Yes, we do absolutely collaborate with not only Missoula Economic Partnership, who I believe is the MEP you referenced there, but other economic development organizations around the state, as well as with Montana Department of Commerce, because they're the lead on business attraction for the state right now. So actually very good partnerships with the EDOs across the state. And I know that they very much appreciate the content that we've developed. Again, Montana's business case on an industry specific basis, because even though we develop those to support our FDI business attraction efforts, they are useful for any EDO who is trying to make the business case for Montana, right? So if your listeners are interested there, I definitely encourage them to check out our website at MWTC.org and look under the resources tab for those. What I wanted to comment on there, or just in complete answer to your question, because you asked, hey, are things slowing down? Are the inquiries still coming? The inquiries are absolutely still coming. And I think that what I have noticed, particularly over the last, probably over the last 8-ish years, and it's gone on this trajectory, a hockey stick curve kind of trajectory during the last couple, is that knowledge-based industries are not only forming and thriving in Montana, but there are knowledge-based industries that are looking at coming to Montana or establishing operations, a branch of their operations in Montana, maybe even as just getting a toe in the water here for a larger scale eventual move. Why? Well, I think that people have discovered this tie between having loyal talent and a positive impact on their bottom line. So I tend not to talk about quality of life because every single economic development organization on the planet talks about quality of life when they are trying to, do a business attraction pitch. We know what it's like here. We know why we're here. We are enlightened. And, I don't know where you're from originally, Scott, but I'm from the East Coast originally, but I've been here for almost 25 years at this point. I am never going back.
I was going to ask you, I was going to say, what is your background? Because yes, I am from the East Coast as well. So you came here 25 years ago. What brought you here?
Just about, a job at the Montana World Trade Center. Actually, Arnie hired me many, many years ago, but
she was an infant.
I was.
I took her into the beginnings of her life experience.
Well, why did you consider Missoula, Montana?
Yeah. So let me not give you a flippant answer there. My husband and I, we were in our 20s, and we were that couple that would vacation out west all the time, go on cool ski trips. And we were we had met and we lived and worked in the Washington, D.C. area for a number of years. And we just started thinking, we're like, well, what if we lived in one of those cool mountain towns? Well, just for a year, just to say that we did it, right? And we'll get it out of our system, and then we'll move back to the big city. And so this is, Scott, back in the day before there was widely available internet, for example.
Right.
Yeah. So
Nexus.
No, we literally, we had a map, and we just started kind of marking on the map places in the Rocky Mountains we wanted an airport, we wanted a college town, because we thought that would really add to the richness and availability of cultural activities. And I think that's absolutely the case. We just wanted somewhere that kind of felt good and where we could find work. And so we flew into Denver, as I remember, got a rental car, and in my week-long vacation that I got at the time, I think we put like 3,500 miles on our
Oh my gosh.
Checking out all these little towns, and Missoula was definitely on our list, and we got here, and
where else did you visit besides Missoula? We
went to Bozeman, we went to Jackson, Oh gosh, I did a no here and forgot to turn my phone off there.
That's okay. Ski towns.
Yeah, basically. But yeah, exactly. There were a couple of them in Colorado as well.
Right.
So, and then we just thought, well, these are all pretty nice. Let's see where we find a job. So,
right.
But anyway.
And of course, let me jump in here. So back in 1997, in that previous century, I was launching a staffed World Trade Center, and actually there were very few local people here who had any international work experience. And,
right.
And Brigitta came in, sent a resume and came in, and she had more work experience than the previous 4 people I had talked to. And it was love at first sight in terms of getting her on board. It was.
Well, I remember that when my husband, John, and I were talking about moving out here, well, I said, well, I'm not going to be able to do anything relating to international business. So I actually I got my teacher's certification to teach secondary Spanish. And so when I serendipitously ran into Arnie here, I thought, well, all right. Yeah. And so, but my experience, I think, although it happened a long time ago and happened with, maps versus the internet and 3,500 miles on the rental car, I think a lot of people are making that personal journey, not only physically here, but that journey of discovery too, as a result of the pandemic. They don't want to be something like my commute was an hour and a half, hour and 40 minutes each way every day.
In DC?
Yes. It was terrible.
Where did you work in DC?
Well, I worked right downtown, very, very close to the White House. But, I was living for a while. I lived in Baltimore and commuted. That's a long story. But then I lived in Laurel. So I would get on, I would get dropped off at the MARC, which is the commuter train, the commuter Amtrak train, then take that in. And then I would take the
Metro.
The Metro, and then I would walk the rest of the way, right? And then reverse at the end of the day. So, it's not hard. My commute right now is 12 minutes. I live on the backside of Jumbo. I've got 10 acres, an amazing view that I'm looking at right now when I talk to you. And, I can do the things that I want to do, that I'm passionate about, right from here. And so again, this does fit into this knowledge-based industries of all kinds that are, forming and making the decision to establish operations here because they know they've got loyal talent.
Are you originally from the Washington D.C. area?
I was born outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So if you ask me, my favorite football team is it is still the Steelers. Yeah.
Great ownership.
I don't worry about any of the in-state college rivalries.
So what do you miss most about the East Coast?
Probably, well, I still have family there. Family, and they do visit, which I love. And I guess the only other small piece of this, and Arnie will know this, and I don't know about you, Scott, depends on where you live back east, but I came from a part of the Jersey. Yeah. Okay, so you'll understand. But I came from a part of the country where every little, even dive bar, and there are a lot of them, or, in those small towns, those communities where I grew up, had somebody's Italian grandma cooking sauce in the back and making the most amazing, just the most amazing Italian food. So I think that we have some decent choices here, but I miss that.
It's always the conversation we have with Arnie, right?
Yeah, food.
It's food.
I mean, you can't. Crappy food back east would be gourmet food here in some cases, particularly of the ethnic variety.
Well,
the Italian grandmas, the Greek food, et cetera, et cetera. And
we're getting better though. And again, I think that's why it's so important to have the vitality and the impact of other cultures, people from other places that come in because of the university presence. I really appreciate that. Yeah. So Scott, that's an interesting question, but more interesting for me personally is what I don't miss. I don't miss anything except like pasta sauce and my parents. So
Hopefully when they come to visit, they bring that. So there you go.
They send me some for Christmas.
Do they? Arnie, Goldbelly can only do so much. You really do need.
That's true. I spent the whole month, as we know, I spent the whole month of August in New York City. So I was satiated. I try to over-satiate myself for the rest of the year.
But Arnie, you did something very wise when you were there for the whole month. You walked everywhere. So no matter what you were consuming, you were burning it off.
Yeah, I didn't gain any weight, which was surprising. I thought I'd come back, they'd have to roll me on the plane, but it didn't quite work out that way because I was walking 4 or 5 miles a day.
Arnie,
That's the best way to learn.
I just muled back 2 dozen H&H pumpernickel bagels, and like a drug mule. I checked them in. Yeah. And sometimes they actually open it up in baggage claim, before they
and they take one.
They think it's like, what is this substance?
Yeah, well, what's the smell we're getting out of his suitcase?
Right. Never do coffee, because coffee, you're really in trouble. They'll totally open it up.
Yeah, of course.
But anyway, I think we all missed the same things, but we don't want to trade this place for anywhere else.
No. Let me switch gears with Brigitta, because we've touched on this in a couple of different ways. I'd like to kind of have her elaborate on it. So we have a lot of businesses in Montana that are homegrown, sole proprietorship, small entrepreneurs who don't think when they're building their business that they have any kind of international, focus. Yet they develop a social media presence and boom, they get customers from other countries that want their products or services. Right. And they've never dealt with other countries. So for our listeners that find themselves in that situation, what kind of advice or what kind of services, do you offer for a company who all of a sudden is finding they're having international clients or customers, they don't know anything about customs or duties or, currency exchange or all those kinds of things and are freaked out by it?
Right. Well, I think that you're right. The internet really changed the dynamic. It used to be that only pretty well-established firms were the firms that were out there and executing export transactions. But, the internet suddenly gave people a global presence that they certainly would not have been capable of having before. So what I would tell them is that there are plenty of opportunities to learn. And the World Trade Center offers a number of those, not only through the trainings that we put forth. I mean, I think our next kind of practical one for somebody just getting into the business of exporting is one on Incoterms. That's international commercial trade terms, right? You better be sure you're using the right one if you're shipping your products these days, especially with the backups that we're having at our ports, right? And I would also tell them, certainly don't be frightened by it, but do be, cautious about your approach. Do take a moment. Just because you're getting a whole bunch of inquiries doesn't mean that you just have to be completely reactive and, okay, we just got 5 inquiries from, this country here, and so that must be where we go. I mean, be intentional about your approach. Take your time, do an organizational assessment to see really what kind of capabilities you do have, what kind of staff would be dedicated to something like this. If there are gaps in that, who are the partners that you could reach out to around the state to help you in your international marketing and business development efforts. The Trade Center often steps in as sort of that on-call extension of the sales and marketing team or business development team that's dedicated specifically to international. And I would also tell you timing is good for something like this. If you are a new to export kind of firm, there are programs that are available out there right now to assist you in your exporting endeavors and not just assist, like I'll give you a pat on the shoulder. I mean, give you money. So, for example, there's a I think it's called State Trade Expansion Partnership. It's STEP is the acronym program that the SBA, the federal SBA, provides some funds for this. And there are mini grants that are available for exporting firms to help you do things like translate your website or your materials or get certifications that you will need to sell your product in other countries or attend a trade show. So times are good for you if you are, taking a methodical approach, evaluating what your needs are, reaching out to get the right partners on board to help you, and then you actually have some funding that can help you do it. So that's what I would say.
And that's a very good way to encapsulate all of that.
I have a question, Brigitta.
Miranda.
Okay. I'm looking at your. By the way, I'm looking at your LinkedIn. That's one way folks can connect with you is through your LinkedIn. I see. But if you had a crystal ball, Brigitta, and you were thinking about, you've seen the growth over the last 25 years, having moved here in 1998, and then put a crystal ball 10 years down the road. What does this place look like? Right? What does Missoula, Montana, Western Montana look like that maybe development-wise that it's not here today?
I think we'll have an innovation corridor gateway project as I envision. I think that'll have a branded World Trade Center in it because I think nothing really makes the case for Montana's place in the global community like a globally recognized brand. And I'm tenacious. I think that we are going to continue to see an inflow of not only individuals who can work remotely, but firms that, like I mentioned before, are knowledge-based industry firms, whether we're talking cloud computing firms or we're talking about bioscience type firms or firms that might even be in the photonics and optic space. I think we'll see more and more of those firms not only site forming here, but transitioning or establishing branch offices in our state, in our vibrant small cities. We know that right now Bozeman and Missoula are getting the bulk of this interest, but it's just a matter of time. People discover these places and they very, very quickly discover other places around the state that have a similar feel and offer similar kinds of advantages in terms of, again, having that loyal talent pool so you can certainly decrease turnover. Yeah.
And like you said, certainly proximity and adjacency to a university or a college is crucial for that. Do you see it moving? The question for both of you, do you see it, not only continuing here, but also moving maybe towards Kalispell or Great Falls or, a little more
here's an interesting
east?
Here's an interesting factoid that sort of fits in with this conversation. I've had some discussions recently with 2 or 3 entrepreneurs that are in the finance sector, that are in the venture capital sector, that are living half-time or more in Big Sky. And while I never thought much about Big Sky, I understand the attraction for folks that are in the financial services area and the kinds of businesses that they are engaged in that don't require them to live in any particular place. If you're funding entrepreneurs around the country, you can live anywhere. And I've had 3 conversations recently with people out of Big Sky that are moving there in that area.
Yeah, I would second that. I mean, there are businesses that have, geographically agnostic business models, right? So that's great. That bodes well for our state, particularly as we ramp up our broadband capabilities. But in answer to your question, Scott, I mean, it is already happening in other parts of our state too. I mean, you mentioned Great Falls and Kalispell. Great Falls has an agri-tech park. We talked at the beginning or earlier in this segment about economic development organizations around the state that we're working with. Great Falls is, I don't know. I don't want to.
I'll say it. They're one of the best. They have one of the best.
They work so hard and they pull all in one direction as a community and they have a very thoughtful plan. There are other places in our state like that too. Butte, outstanding community of people to work with. And, one of the things that I love about Butte is that they, obviously people around our state know Butte's history, right? And the importance of mining to that community. And certainly they recognize more than any other part of our state how important it is for them to embrace what they have, but plan for the future. What does Butte look like moving forward? And how can we achieve that? So, Port of Montana outside of Butte and the Montana Connections Park there is an amazing facility. And I just was out there, I don't know, 2 months ago, maybe August, I guess, at this point. And they were breaking ground on a couple new facilities. So it's already happening around our state. And it's not just the geographically agnostic business models. There is a case for different types of manufacturing in our state. And so our communities are being vocal and intentional and bringing in some really good projects.
It's exciting. That's a good place. That's a good place to break. Our guest is Brigitta Miranda-Freer, the executive director of the World Trade Center. And Arnie, we will be back after this with our final words with Brigitta. Back after this.
Grow here with a gentle reminder that civilization is held together by pipes, wires, and cables. It's true. There are over 5 million miles of gas lines, power lines, fiber optic lines, water lines, and sewer lines, all buried beneath your feet. And every 60 seconds, somebody digs into one. Look, if you're thinking about digging around, do yourself a favor and call 811 first just to find out what's down there. Trust me, you don't want to find out the hard way. Call or click 811 before you dig and visit safeexcavator.com for more info.
The Department of Veterans Affairs is so innovative, it not only improves the lives of veterans, it transforms the lives of healthcare professionals who serve them with access to the latest technologies and remarkable benefits. Transform your future at vacareers.va.gov.
All right, we are back with our guest, Brigitta Miranda-Freer, Executive Director of the World Trade Center.
So, Brigitta, how do folks get a hold of you and find out about all the great things that you're involved with?
Well, it could very well be that I'm still the only Brigitta in Montana. So either they can just stand out on the street corner and say my name and someone will say, oh, I know that person. Or they can look us up online. We are at MWTC.org. That's M as in mother, WTC.org. And you'll find any and all information that you need to get a hold of us and to see kind of upcoming activities on our website.
That is fantastic. Brigitta, thank you so much. You've been a wonderful guest, delightful. We'll have to have you back for an update.
Sure.
Yeah, Arnie and I love speaking to folks about this stuff, and it always turns to food, Arnie. I'm not sure why. That maybe it's the universal.
We're always hungry, that's why.
And it's lunchtime. Anyway, thanks again, Brigitta. Arnie, I'll see you next week.
Take care.
Thanks,
Take care,
guys.
Brigitta. Thank
Take
you.
care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to What Do You Know?
I can't wait for the next show, Scott.
I'm excited too, Arnie. If you'd like to suggest a guest, send me an email at scottrichman@townsquaremedia.com. We'll see you next week. And thanks for listening to Newstalk KGVO,